It's been more than 40 years since that night, but I still think about it whenever the road gets too quiet. The memory comes back easy. The way the air felt heavy, the smell of hot asphalt, and that uneasy stillness that doesn't belong on a country road. Back in the summer of '82, I was 19, halfway through my first year of college, feeling older than I had any right to. Ridgefield, Arkansas, was home. A small town surrounded by pine and swamp. The kind of place where everybody knew what brand of cigarettes you smoked. That day I'd been helping my buddy Calvin move out of his apartment over in Monroe. We spent the afternoon hauling furniture in the heat, and by the time I hit the road, it was pushing 7. I remember tossing his old cooler into the back seat, half full of melted ice and Dr. Peppers, thinking I'd be home by 9 if I kept a steady pace. Mom had warned me not to take the old Turner Creek route after dark. That stretch gets strange after sunset, she said, like the trees themselves could swallow you whole. I'd laughed it off at the time, but as I turned onto that narrow 2-lane highway, her words floated back like static through my head. The radio was out, the needle on the gas gauge trembling just above empty. The world outside had that golden tint you get before a storm, light but heavy, quiet but tense. I remember seeing a sign I didn't recognize. Turner Creek, 5 miles. Maybe it had always been there. Maybe I just never noticed. Either way, it sent a small chill through me. A few minutes later, a set of headlights appeared behind me. At first, I felt relief. You don't realize how alone you are on a back road until someone else shows up. But that feeling didn't last long. The truck behind me, an old rusted pickup, started closing the gap fast. I eased off the gas, figuring he'd pass. He did, but then slowed down, almost matching my speed. I remember thinking, what the hell is this guy doing? When I tried to go around, he hit the brakes hard. My tires squealed, the Chevy fishtailed, and I just barely managed to stay on the pavement. Idiot! I shouted through the windshield. My heart was pounding, my palms slick, but the pickup didn't move on. It just rolled backwards slowly, its reverse lights glowing dull red. Something in me switched. This wasn't some random jerk. I threw the Nova into gear and floored it, gravel kicking up behind me. When I looked back, the truck had stopped. No pursuit, no movement. Just silence. For a few minutes, I thought it was over. I even laughed nervously to myself. But then, just up ahead, I saw those same headlights waiting at a side road, like he'd known where I was going. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about bad luck or road rage. I was being hunted. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my fingers went numb. The truck eased back onto the highway, falling in behind me again. No horn, no lights flashing, no reason. Just steady and silent. The road between Turner Creek and Ridgefield is long and lonely. The pines press close, branches stretching overhead like hands. You could drive for miles without seeing a porch light. Every few seconds, I checked the mirror. His headlights stayed the same distance, too far to make out his face, but close enough that I could feel him there. I reached for my CB radio, an old handheld my dad had given me, but it was dead. No charge. No luck. The road curved right, then left. I took a sharp turn down a side lane I'd never used before, hoping to lose him. It was gravel, rough and narrow, the trees crowding in. At first, I thought it worked. The headlights disappeared behind a bend, but just as I started to breathe, I saw them again. Brighter this time, bouncing off the trees. He'd followed me. The road ended suddenly at a dirt embankment. A dead end. My heart dropped. I slammed the brakes and felt the Nova shudder to a stop. The pickup came to a slow crawl behind me, engine rumbling low like an animal waiting to pounce. I killed my headlights and held my breath. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I heard his door open, slow, creaking, followed by boots crunching gravel. I didn't wait. I threw the door open and bolted into the trees. Branches whipped my arms, roots snagged my boots, but adrenaline kept me going. Behind me, the man's flashlight cut through the dark, a single white beam swinging left to right. "Come on, boy," he called, voice calm and teasing. Thought you wanted to drive home? That voice froze me more than the cold dirt under my hands. It wasn't angry. It was amused, like he'd done this before. I crouched behind a fallen log, trying to steady my breathing. The flashlight beam swept across the ravine twice, then again, slower. Then the sound of the engine faded. I waited until I heard birds again before I dared move. When I finally stumbled out of the woods, the sky was pale gray. My clothes were soaked, my arms cut up, and I'd lost one shoe somewhere along the way. My car was gone. Only tire marks remained, deep grooves that led back toward the highway. I followed the road until I reached an old farmhouse. A man named Earl picked me up and drove me to the nearest gas station. I must have looked like hell because the cashier didn't even ask questions, just handed me the phone. The cops took my statement, polite but skeptical. "You're sure you weren't drinking, son?" one of them asked. "Not a drop," I said. They took me back to the spot later that morning. No sign of the pickup, no sign of my Nova. The deputy shrugged. "Probably some local punks trying to scare you," he said. But I knew better. There was nothing playful in that man's voice. For weeks I kept checking the classifieds, hoping someone would report a similar truck. Nothing. When I went back to school that fall, I avoided driving at night altogether. I'd sit in parking lots until morning if it meant waiting for daylight. Years later, I'd hear about disappearances along that same stretch. Hunters, travelers, a teenage girl. They'd find cars, but no drivers. Each report brought the same cold twist in my gut. I tried to tell myself it wasn't the same man, but I never really believed it. Time has a way of softening the edges of memory, but not that one. Even now, when I drive home to visit Mom's grave in Ridgefield, I can't help checking the rear view. The highways are brighter these days, gas stations every few miles, but some roads still feel like they're holding their breath. One evening about 10 years ago, I took that route again by mistake, Turner Creek Road. The sign was newer, cleaner. State Route 61A. The moment I realized where I was, my throat went dry. I told myself it was fine, that the man was probably long gone, maybe dead. But halfway through that stretch I saw it, headlights behind me, far back but steady. My stomach dropped. For miles they followed, keeping perfect distance. When I slowed, they slowed. When I sped up, they did too. Then just as suddenly they vanished. No turnoff, no driveways, no side roads. Gone. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe not. I pulled over and sat there in silence, staring into the mirror, waiting for something to move. Nothing did. But that old fear came flooding back. Not because I thought he was there, but because I realized how easily he could be. I'm 61 now. Married once, divorced, no kids. Sometimes I wonder if that night had something to do with it. The way I've kept everyone at arm's length, never staying in one place too long. A few months back, I bought an old '73 Nova from a junkyard outside Little Rock. Same model, same color as the one I lost. When I sat in the driver's seat, the smell of old leather brought it all back. I started restoring it part by part, maybe hoping that if I fixed the car, I could fix the memory too. But when I finally got it running and took it out for a drive, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was behind me. Maybe that's just what trauma does. It teaches you to see ghosts in mirrors. Or maybe some people never stop following you. Either way, I still take the long way home. No matter how familiar the road looks, never ignore that small voice inside that says, something's wrong. Instinct is the oldest kind of wisdom, and the most honest, because some dangers don't live in the dark. They live in the moment you stop listening to yourself. I've told this story maybe a dozen times over the years, though I'm not sure anyone's ever truly believed it. They smile politely, say something like, GPS can glitch sometimes, and go back to their coffee. But I know what I saw that night. Or maybe the truth is I know what I felt, and that's worse. It was March 16th, 2019, one of those stormy nights that makes you question your own sanity for being on the road at all. I was 33 then, working long shifts as a caregiver at a senior home in Tillamook, Oregon. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and I loved my residents, most of them anyway. That night I was covering for a sick coworker, 14 hours straight. By the time I clocked out, my body felt like a sandbag. My boyfriend Sam texted me around 11:45 p.m. "Storm's bad tonight. Drive slow, okay?" I remember smiling at my phone before shoving it in the cup holder. The rain was already coming in sideways, the kind that sounds like gravel against glass. I got into my old 2006 Chevy Malibu, turned the key, and told myself it was just another drive home. The wipers couldn't keep up. The road shimmered under my headlights, and the ocean wind shoved at the car like it wanted to push me right off the shoulder. I kept my hands tight on the wheel, half whispering, "Just 30 miles, Mara. You've done worse." When the GPS finally spoke, it startled me. "Continue for 3 miles, then turn right." That didn't sound right. My normal route went straight through town, not into the back roads that skirted the cliffs. But I was too tired to argue with the voice. The screen glowed soft blue, promising me a shorter route home. I figured, what's the harm? I should have just kept driving the way I knew. The lane narrowed almost immediately. The pavement turned patchy and rough, with weeds pressing through the cracks. The headlights picked up a bent, weathered sign. "Pinemore Hollow, 2 miles." I muttered, "Where the hell is Pinemore Hollow?" and kept going, though something in my gut was already turning cold. The rain came harder. The radio started to hiss, bouncing between stations until it landed on an old folk song, the kind that sounds like it's being sung down a hallway. For a second, I almost liked it. Then, under the static, I heard another voice, faint, female, whispering words I couldn't make out. I turned the dial, thinking it was interference, but the voice grew clearer. It said, "Don't stop." I froze, hand still on the knob. "Okay," I whispered to no one. "I won't." Ahead, fog crawled across the road like smoke. To my left, I thought I saw an old gas station, its flickering sign glowing weakly through the mist. I blinked, turned my head fully, and it was gone. The GPS spoke again. "In 100 feet, turn right." There was no right turn, just a narrow gap in the brush that looked like a dirt trail. The screen glitched, redrawing itself until the arrow pointed straight toward that gap. 10 minutes shorter," I said, forcing a laugh. "Sure. Why not?" The moment I turned, the rain stopped. The world went silent, like someone had turned off the sound. Only the crunch of my tires on wet gravel. The trees pressed in tight, their branches scraping the roof. My headlights stretched only a few feet ahead before being swallowed by fog. That's when I noticed the clock on the dashboard freeze at 1:03 a.m. and then blink out completely. I slowed down, heart thudding. My phone had lost signal, no bars, no GPS map. The road twisted like it couldn't decide which way it wanted to go. Every so often, I caught movement in the mirrors, flashes of light that might have been reflections or maybe headlights. But when I checked again, there was nothing there. I tried to talk to myself like I did when anxiety got bad. "It's just fog. It's just weather. GPS messed up, that's all." My voice sounded too loud in the quiet. Then I heard it. Laughter. Not loud, but soft, like a child giggling far away. I slammed on the brakes. "Hello?" My headlights shone on trees and fog. Nothing else. I was shaking when I threw the car back in gear. That's when the GPS voice came back, but it wasn't right anymore. It was distorted, deeper, almost mechanical. "Turn around." I gripped the wheel. "What did you say?" "Turn around. Turn around. Turn around." I screamed, spinning the wheel so fast I nearly clipped a tree. Mud splattered the windows. My heart was slamming in my chest when my headlights hit something. Or someone. A woman. Standing in the middle of the lane. She wore a long raincoat, soaked through, her head tilted slightly, eyes wide and glassy. I swerved hard, missing her by inches, and the car fishtailed back onto the main road. When I looked in the mirror, She wasn't there. I didn't think. I just drove. It felt like hours before the dirt gave way to asphalt again. When I burst through the fog, I saw headlights ahead, a semi-truck barreling down the highway. I swerved onto the shoulder, horn blaring. The driver pulled over immediately, jumping out with his raincoat half on. "Ma'am, you okay? You came out of nowhere." I nodded, barely able to speak. I was on the shortcut. The GPS took me." He frowned. "Shortcut? Ain't no roads back there." I turned, pointing behind me. But there was nothing, just a steep, muddy embankment dripping with rainwater. No lane, no tire tracks. He looked at me for a long time, then helped me into the cab of his truck. I sat there, trembling, watching the wipers swipe rhythmically while the storm howled outside. "You're lucky," he said finally. "That stretch kills people every year. Roads wash out. They look like trails until you're halfway down a cliff." I didn't tell him about the woman. I couldn't even find the words. The next morning, Sam drove me back to my car. I showed him the GPS history. No record of the detour. No mention of Pinemore Hollow. We asked a gas station clerk about it, an older man with a thick coastal accent. He scratched his chin and said, "You sure you didn't mean Pinemore Hamlet? Washed into the sea back in the 70s. Whole town gone overnight during a storm like this one." I just nodded, pretending to take it lightly. But deep down, I knew. That night, when I got home, I deleted every saved route in my GPS. I don't trust the voice anymore, not the one from the device, and not the one in my own head that tells me shortcuts are harmless. Now, when I drive home from a late shift and the rain hits hard, I stick to the roads I know. The long, boring, predictable ones, because there's something worse than getting lost. It's realizing that maybe the road found you. Sometimes the fastest route isn't the right one. The world offers endless shortcuts in roads and choices in life itself, but not all of them lead where you think. Trust your instincts, not the easy voice that says, "Turn here." Because some turns don't take you home, they take you back. They say Wyoming winters can make you lose your sense of direction, that after a while everything turns white and quiet until you can't tell sky from ground. I used to think that was just cowboy talk. I don't anymore. Back in January 2008, I was 26, living out of my Subaru and trying to make a name as a freelance wildlife photographer. It sounds romantic when you tell people at parties, the kind of life that looks poetic in black and white photos. But most of the time, it was just cold, lonely, and expensive. That week I'd been shooting elk near Yellowstone. My assignment had fallen through. Editor ghosted me, payment delayed, so I was heading home with nothing but a car full of frozen sandwiches and the smell of stale coffee. It had been snowing since morning, a slow, steady curtain that made the whole world look erased. The heater struggled to keep up, my wipers squealed, and the radio had long since given up on finding a station. I remember calling Rachel, my girlfriend then, though we were more like two people waiting for a reason to stop pretending. "Almost home," I told her, voice shaky from fatigue. "You sound wrecked," she said. "If it gets bad, pull over, promise?" "Promise," I said. And like an idiot, I meant the opposite, because I've always had this thing about finishing what I start, even when the world's telling me to quit. An hour later, the Subaru sputtered, coughed once, and died on a deserted service road somewhere west of Cody. I stared at the dashboard like it had betrayed me. The fuel gauge sat buried under a layer of frost, the light too dim to see. Snow was already climbing the tires. The wind screamed against the glass. I grabbed my coat, slung my camera bag over my shoulder, and stepped out into the kind of cold that doesn't just sting, it hurts. I started walking west, toward where the map had shown a gas station about 15 miles out. 15 miles. In that weather, it might as well have been 50. Every few steps I looked back, but the car had already disappeared behind a wall of white. I remember thinking how quiet it was, like the world had stopped breathing. After what felt like hours, headlights cut through the storm from behind me. Relief hit like caffeine. I waved both arms, shouting even though the wind tore my voice away. A red semi-truck slowed to a crawl beside me. The passenger door creaked open. "Need a lift?" the driver asked. His voice was deep, steady. "God, yes," I said, climbing in. The cab was warm, smelled like diesel and something sweet, almost syrupy. The man's name was Cal. He wore a trucker cap low over his brow, leather gloves on both hands, and a thick jacket that looked older than me. "Hell of a night," I said, rubbing my hands. "Night's the only time I drive," he replied. I tried to laugh, but it sounded weak. "Guess it's quieter that way." "Quieter's good," he said, eyes fixed on the road. The wipers thumped back and forth, hypnotic. Outside, the snow was coming down sideways. "Where you headed?" I asked. "West." "Me too. Figure I'll grab gas at the next station." He didn't answer. The CB radio crackled, static and half words. Trucker chatter maybe, or just interference. After 20 minutes, I realized we weren't heading toward the interstate anymore. The headlights showed a narrow lane cutting through dense forest. "Hey, I think we missed the turnoff," I said. "Shortcut," Cal muttered. "Trust me." I stared at my phone. No service, no signal. That's when I noticed the back of the cab. Something long was wrapped in plastic tarp, wedged beside a shovel. The sweet smell was stronger there, heavy like rotten fruit. I told myself it was just freight. Freight and imagination. The road got rougher, bouncing us around. I kept thinking about Rachel, about how I'd promised her I'd pull over if things got bad. They were bad now. "You haul for a company?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Freight work," Cal said. "Independent." "What kind of freight?" He glanced at me then. Just a second too long. "For people who don't like questions." Something in my stomach dropped. Outside, the snow was getting thicker, branches hanging heavy over the road. My reflection in the window looked pale, eyes wide. Cal's hands gripped the wheel too tight. Every time the truck fishtailed, he corrected it with precision, like he'd driven this road 100 times before. We passed a sign half buried in snow. "White Road, 1 mile." I said, "That name doesn't sound real." Cal smiled faintly. "It's real enough." We drove another minute before he eased the truck to a stop. "Need to check the load," he said. He reached behind him, grabbing the shovel handle. My pulse hammered in my throat. "Mind if I stretch my legs?" I asked. "Don't go far." His tone was calm, too calm. The second my boots hit the snow, I turned and ran. The forest swallowed me whole. Branches whipped at my face, my breath tearing out in white clouds. Behind me, Cal shouted something, words I couldn't hear, then the sound of the truck door slamming. I kept running, slipping, falling, getting back up. Every noise sounded like footsteps. Every shadow looked like movement. At one point, I tripped over a root and face-planted into the snow. When I looked up, I saw a faint orange glow in the distance. Light, civilization, anything. I stumbled toward it, half blind. The glow became neon, a flickering sign, a diner. Out here, in the middle of nowhere. I burst through the door, the bell jangling violently. The waitress, gray hair, kind face, froze with a coffee pot midair. 2 truckers looked up from their plates. "Please, call the police," I gasped. "There's a guy out there." They moved fast. One of the truckers ran outside with a flashlight. The other grabbed a phone. I turned toward the window just in time to see headlights receding into the storm. Red. Fading. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, they followed the tire tracks north until they stopped at a frozen creek. No bridge. No tracks beyond it. They told me I was lucky. I believed them. They found the red semi 3 days later, abandoned 10 miles north, engine still idling. Cab empty, tarp gone. The cops asked 100 questions. What did he look like? What did he say? Could I identify him? All I remembered were his hands, those black gloves gripping the wheel, steady as a metronome. I moved to Seattle a month later, sold the Subaru, sold most of my camera gear. I told myself it was about starting over, but the truth is, I couldn't stand the quiet anymore. The way snow muffles sound, the way headlights look in fog. I never drove at night again. Still don't. Every winter when the first snow hits the ground, I see that stretch of road in my dreams. Endless white, no horizon. I'm walking again, cold biting my lungs, waiting for headlights that always appear, slow and steady, matching my pace. And even after I wake up, heart pounding, I still hear his voice low and calm. Night's the only time I drive. Sometimes danger doesn't come from darkness itself, but from the comfort of believing someone else knows the way. Trust is a powerful thing, and out on the white road it can be deadly. Always listen to your instincts, even when they whisper against reason, because not every ride is meant to take you home. They say you can't really know how dark the world can get until you're driving through it alone. That night on Route 92, I learned what that meant. The rain came down in silver sheets, drumming against the windshield of my old green Subaru as if trying to break through. The dashboard clock glowed. 11:45 p.m. Its light dim but steady, keeping rhythm with the windshield wipers. I'd spent the last 3 days hiking through a remote bogland in northern Vermont, collecting moss samples for my research on alpine plant resilience. I was bone-tired, soaked, and more than ready to sleep for 12 hours straight. But life had other plans. My father was in the hospital again, complications from the stroke he'd had that spring, and guilt pressed on me heavier than the storm clouds. The radio crackled between static and half-caught country songs. I remember thinking how lonely it all sounded, like a voice calling across miles of nothing. Then, without warning, came the pop, sharp, violent, unmistakable. The car jerked to the right, tires skidding over the slick road. I slammed the brakes and swore under my breath, heart pounding as I fought the wheel until the car shuddered to a stop on the shoulder. Rain slapped the glass. Steam hissed faintly from the hood. I sat there for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel, staring into the black stretch of highway ahead. No lights, no houses, just forest, thick and endless, whispering in the wind. When I finally climbed out, the cold bit through my jacket. My flashlight beam cut across the roadside ditch and the ruined tire, shredded like paper. Perfect, I muttered. I had a spare, but no signal on my phone and no real idea if I could change a tire in this weather without sliding into the mud. That's when I saw it. A faint orange flicker between the trees. A light steady and rhythmic like a lantern swinging. A cabin, maybe. I hesitated, every horror movie I'd ever seen running through my mind. But 20 miles from the nearest town, soaked and freezing, logic lost to desperation. I grabbed my flashlight, locked the car, and stepped into the forest. Branches clawed at my jacket as I trudged through pine needles and wet leaves. The light grew brighter, steadier, until the shape of a small cabin emerged. Wood darkened with age, roof sagging under moss and rain. A single bulb glowed behind the window. I knocked once, softly, already half regretting it. The door opened with a slow creak. A man stood there, tall and lean, maybe in his late 40s, wearing a tweed coat that looked decades old. His smile was calm, his eyes unreadable. "Looks like you need help," he said. His voice was low, kind, but something in it felt too even, too practiced. "I blew a tire," I said. "You wouldn't happen to have a jack or a wrench, would you?" "Come in out of the rain," he offered, stepping aside. "Name's Edwin Caro. I've got tools, and hot tea if you want to warm up." Every instinct screamed, no. But the cold pushed me forward. The cabin smelled faintly of cedar and old books. The fire crackled in a stone hearth, throwing long shadows on the walls lined with framed photographs. "Sit," he said, gesturing toward a chair. You look half frozen." I did. Steam rose from the teacup he handed me, and the warmth was almost dizzying. I glanced at the photographs, rows of portraits in antique frames, dim under the lamplight. And then my chest went cold. The woman in the nearest photo looked just like me. Same eyes, same hair, same smile. I blinked, moved closer. Another photo, same face. Me at what looked like a college graduation I'd never attended. My breath caught, my voice trembled. "These pictures," I said. "Where did you get them?" Edwin smiled again, that too gentle, hollow smile. "You've been part of this place for a long time, Clara. Longer than you remember." The storm raged outside. Inside, everything was suddenly too quiet. He poured more tea as if nothing were wrong. "You're shaking," he said. "Drink. You'll feel better." "I didn't tell you my name," I whispered. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stirred his tea slowly, the spoon clinking against the porcelain cup. "Names aren't hard to learn out here," he said finally, "especially when someone leaves pieces of their life lying around." I set the cup down, my fingers slick with sweat despite the chill. "Pieces?" He looked up at me, eyes soft, almost sympathetic. "You drive the same road often. You stop at the same gas station. You buy that bottled jasmine tea you like. People notice patterns. I notice patterns." My pulse quickened. "You've been watching me." He tilted his head, unbothered. "Let's not call it that. Observation is part of human curiosity, don't you think?" I stood. The old floorboards groaned under my boots. "You have photographs of me in your house," I said, voice rising. "That's not curiosity." He smiled faintly. "They're not mine." "Then whose are they?" Edwin's gaze drifted toward the fire. "Sit down, Clara. The storm's bad. You'll crash if you go back out there now." "I'll take my chances." The door was only a few steps away, but my legs felt rooted. The sound of rain on the roof grew heavier, thunder rumbling low in the distance. I grabbed my flashlight from the table, and as I turned, something flickered in the corner, an open doorway leading to a back room. Inside, through the dim light, I saw boxes stacked to the ceiling, each labeled with a name written in fading ink. One box caught my eye. Reynolds, C. My stomach twisted. I shined the flashlight closer. The box was filled with envelopes, Polaroids, even an old hairbrush. My hairbrush, from my apartment. "How did you—" I started, but Edwin was suddenly behind me, close enough that I felt the heat of his breath. "Memories have to be kept somewhere," he said quietly. "People forget, but places remember." I turned, nearly slipping. "Stay away from me." He didn't move. "You came here for help. You should have stayed on the road." I ran. The front door resisted for half a second before it gave way, slamming open into the rain. I sprinted toward the trees, mud splashing, my flashlight beam cutting wildly through the dark. Behind me, the door creaked again. I didn't look back. The woods swallowed me whole. The rain blurred everything. The beam from my flashlight flickered, dying, sputtering against the storm. I stumbled through the trees, slipping on roots, lungs burning. Every sound, every rustle, every crack, felt like footsteps behind me. When I finally stopped, gasping, I couldn't see the highway lights anymore. Only darkness and the faint outline of trees pressing close. "Think, Clara," I muttered, my voice trembling. "Find the road." Lightning flashed, brief, white, merciless. For an instant, I saw the shape of the cabin again, closer than it should have been, its windows glowing faintly through the rain. "No," I whispered. I turned the other way, pushing deeper into the woods. Branches whipped at my face, my hair plastered to my cheeks. The cold bit into my skin, but adrenaline kept me moving. Then, faintly, through the noise of the storm, I heard it, a voice. My name, drawn out, calm, the same tone that had made my skin crawl. "Clara." I stopped breathing. "Come back. You'll catch cold." I ran again. My boot caught on something metal buried in the mud. I fell hard, palms scraping against wet gravel. When I looked up, the flashlight beam caught a shape. A car door. My car door. The Subaru sat ahead, lights off, exactly where I'd left it. Relief flooded me. I fumbled for the keys, yanked open the driver's side door, and climbed in. The air inside was cold, heavy with the scent of wet fabric. I jammed the key into the ignition, turned, nothing, dead. The dashboard was black. And then from the rearview mirror I saw him, Edwin, standing by the tree line, face half shadowed, smiling that same hollow smile. I locked the doors. "Go away," I whispered. "Just go away." He didn't move, only lifted his hand, gesturing for me to roll down the window. When I didn't, he turned slowly and disappeared into the woods. I waited until dawn before daring to move again. By morning, the storm had thinned to drizzle. The Subaru finally sputtered to life after I changed the spare and dried the engine leads. The world looked different in daylight, smaller, less terrifying, but the fear hadn't faded. When I drove past the spot where I'd seen the cabin, there was nothing. Only a clearing of broken fence posts and the remains of what looked like a foundation, half swallowed by weeds. The road was empty. I pulled over, stepped out, and walked through the wet grass to where the cabin had stood. Mud soaked through my boots. There were no footprints but mine, no fire pit, no lights. Just silence. Part of me wanted to believe it had been a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But when I reached into my pocket, I found something that made my heart stop. A small antique photograph. It was damp, but intact. The image showed me standing in front of that same cabin, smiling. Except the date scrawled on the back said, October 14th, 1972. Weeks passed. I told no one. I returned to work, visited my father, and tried to convince myself it had been a nightmare. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that flickering light through the trees. Then one night, while sorting through research notes, I found an old newspaper clipping tucked into one of my field journals. I didn't remember putting it there. The headline read, "Local Hermit Missing Since 1973. Edwin Caro last seen near Route 92. The photo was unmistakable. Same face, same coat, same hollow smile. I dropped the paper. My pulse pounded in my ears. The photograph from the cabin was gone from my desk. That night, I dreamed of rain and pine needles and a voice whispering my name. When I woke, the window was open, and on the sill sat a single photograph. Me, standing in the woods, looking over my shoulder. I moved away from Vermont soon after. I never took Route 92 again. But sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind rushes through the trees, I swear I can hear that same calm voice. Looks like you need help. Danger doesn't always come with warning signs or monsters. It often wears a friendly smile and offers you tea on a stormy night. The human mind is wired to rationalize fear, to explain away danger. But instinct is ancient, honest, and rarely wrong. In a world where darkness hides behind ordinary faces, your gut may be the only thing that truly keeps you safe. I never liked office parties, but that night I told myself I should go. It was New Year's Eve 2017, and the whole team at the design firm was gathering at Miller's Pub downtown. Portland was dusted with snow, that kind of quiet white that softens every sound and makes the city feel smaller, safer. I remember thinking how peaceful it looked from my apartment window. I should have stayed there. I had turned 27 a week earlier and promised myself a year of change. Get serious about freelance work, finally travel somewhere warm, maybe even start dating again. But when the holidays came, I spent them alone, eating takeout, video calling my parents, pretending it didn't bother me. So, when my coworker Amy said, "Come on, Clara, you can't spend New Year's watching Netflix," I gave in. The pub was warm and noisy, packed with people already halfway drunk on cheap champagne. Music thumped from the jukebox. Someone had strung gold tinsel across the mirrors. I stayed near the bar, nursing a gin and tonic, trying not to look like I was waiting for someone. By 11:30, most people had paired off, laughing in corners or stumbling toward cabs. I felt invisible, like a ghost at a party. When midnight came, I clinked glasses with Amy, forced a smile, and made an excuse about an early morning. The air outside was sharp enough to bite through my coat. I tugged my scarf higher, watching snow drift beneath the streetlights. My car sat a few blocks away, covered in frost. But I'd had 2 drinks, enough to know I shouldn't drive. I opened my rideshare app, requested a ride home, and leaned under the pub's awning while flakes gathered on my sleeves. Driver arriving in 4 minutes, the screen read. I remember feeling oddly comforted by that tiny countdown. It made the night feel controlled, predictable, safe. When the dark blue Camry pulled up, I didn't even question it. The driver rolled down the window and warm air spilled out. "Clara?" he asked. His voice was deep, calm, the way teachers talk when they already know the answer. I nodded automatically, slid into the back seat and buckled up. He looked about 50, gray beard, thick coat, clean car. Nothing about him screamed danger. The heater hummed, the radio murmured softly in the background. I pulled out my phone, half asleep, scrolling through leftover holiday texts. The city lights thinned as we moved away from downtown. Then I noticed we'd taken a left instead of a right. "Hey, I think you missed the turn," I said, leaning forward. "Shortcut," he replied without looking at me. Something in his tone, flat, final, made me sit back. The snow outside thickened, swallowing the road signs. My screen showed our route curving away from the city. The app said, "Arriving in 19 minutes." Then it blinked, glitched, and read, "Driver not yet arrived." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the weather. At first I thought it was a tech error, bad signal maybe, but when I refreshed the screen, the map still showed my pin blinking at Miller's Pub, not moving. My ride hadn't started. My throat went dry. "Hey," I said again, forcing a light laugh. "The app's being weird. It says you haven't picked me up yet." He didn't answer right away. The windshield wipers dragged across glass with a slow, rhythmic squeak. Finally, he said, "Phones lie sometimes." That's when I noticed how quiet it was. No music, no chatter, just the hum of tires on snow. The city lights had vanished completely. We were surrounded by trees now, dark shapes bending under the weight of snow. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Can you let me out here? I'll call another ride." He kept his eyes on the road. "We're almost there." "Almost where?" No answer. My heart started to race. I reached for the door handle, locked. The little silver tab sat flush against the frame. I pressed the unlock button on my side. Nothing. "Please, I think you made a wrong turn," I said louder this time. "My place is back near the harbor." "Don't worry," he murmured. "I know where you live." The words landed like a stone in my stomach. I wanted to scream, but fear pinned me still. I scanned the dashboard for a name tag, an ID. Nothing. Just a faded pine-scented air freshener swinging from the mirror. Outside, the snow fell harder, erasing the road behind us. He slowed the car, headlights sweeping across an intersection I didn't recognize. A red light flickered weakly through the storm. That was my chance. I unlatched my seatbelt quietly, fingers trembling. The car coasted toward the intersection, brakes squealing softly. My eyes flicked between the red light and the door handle. I whispered to myself, "Do it now, Clara." The moment the car rolled nearly to a stop, I yanked the handle twice and threw my shoulder into the door. It flew open, snow and wind slamming into my face. I stumbled out, hit the slush hard on my knees, and scrambled toward the sidewalk. "Hey!" the man shouted. His voice cut through the storm, sharp now, no longer calm. The engine roared. I slipped once, caught myself and bolted toward a flickering neon sign at the corner. Open 24 hours. A diner. I didn't look back until I reached the door. The Camry sat idling for a heartbeat, then sped off into the darkness. Inside, the diner smelled like coffee and fried onions. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, took one look at me and said, "Honey, you okay?" I couldn't even form words. She grabbed a blanket from behind the counter, wrapped it around my shoulders, and called the police. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. 2 officers arrived within 15 minutes. I told them everything: the car, the man, the wrong turn, the fake pickup. They checked my phone, the app, the timestamps. My actual driver, a woman named Rena, had been circling near Miller's pub for 20 minutes trying to reach me. No record of any blue Camry existed in the system. Could it have been an unregistered driver? One officer asked. Or someone pretending, the other said quietly. They offered to take me home. I refused. I didn't want to be in another car with a stranger. I walked back through the snow instead, blanket tight around me, feeling every shadow shift. The days that followed blurred together. I told a few close friends what happened, left out the parts that sounded insane. Most people just said, "God, that's terrifying," and changed the subject. I couldn't blame them. It felt surreal even to me. At night, I replayed it over and over. The moment he said, "Phones lie sometimes," the way he smiled without looking at me. I stopped using rideshare apps entirely. Sold my car, bought a used SUV with 4-wheel drive, safer for the snow. Still, every time I drove alone, I caught myself glancing in the mirrors too often, expecting headlights that never came. A week later, a detective called. They'd traced security footage near Miller's pub. The camera showed a blue Camry stopping briefly at the curb at 12:14 a.m. A man stepped out, waited a moment, then got back in. The license plate was unreadable. The car never appeared on any toll cameras after that. "Probably a stolen vehicle," the detective said. "Be careful, Ms. Reese. You did the right thing getting out." Doing the right thing didn't make me feel better. I kept thinking about how easily I'd trusted him, how casually I'd climbed into a stranger's car just because an app told me to. I'd lived in Portland my whole life. We prided ourselves on being friendly, safe, neighborly. But that night proved how thin safety really was, how quickly it could dissolve into fear. A year passed before I talked about it openly. It was another snowy night, same time of year. I was meeting Amy for dinner, and she offered to book us a ride home after. I almost said yes out of habit. Then I saw the reflection of a dark sedan pulling up outside, its headlights cutting through the snow, and my stomach flipped. "I'll drive," I said. She looked at me, puzzled. "You sure?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'm sure." On the way home, the streets were nearly empty. The snow fell thick and soft against the windshield, the city glowing faintly behind it. For the first time in a while, I felt calm, but it was a cautious kind of calm, the kind that comes from knowing exactly what could go wrong. Sometimes I still hear that voice in my head. Phones lie sometimes. Not as a threat now, but as a reminder. That night didn't end my trust in people, but it changed how I measure it. I double-check plates, I confirm faces, I lock my doors the second I sit down. Maybe it's paranoia, or maybe it's just survival. I'll never know who that man was or what he wanted. The police never found him, and maybe they never will. But I do know this. When instinct tells you something's wrong, it's already late in the game. The only question left is whether you'll listen. Danger doesn't always wear a mask. It smiles politely, drives a clean car, and sounds like it knows your name. We live in a world built on trust and technology, but no screen or system can protect you better than your own gut. The voice inside that whispers, "Something's wrong," is ancient wisdom trying to keep you alive. Never ignore it. It was one of those nights where the rain never stops, the kind that turns every streetlight into a haloed blur. I'd just finished my overnight shift at the shipyard in Aberdeenshire, Scotland, and the roads were empty, slick with mist that clung to the windshield like ghostly fingers. My name's Michael Turner. I'm 42, widowed, and the father of one remarkable teenager, my daughter Lydia. She's 16, stubborn, full of life, obsessed with photography and old indie bands. She has a way of noticing things most people walk right past, which makes her both delightful and terrifying at the same time. That night, the world was quiet. My car hummed softly as I drove past abandoned docks, the scent of wet metal and sea brine hanging in the air. Lydia had borrowed her little blue hatchback the night before to go to a friend's party. Normally, she drives her own car, but that night she needed the heater in mine. A small argument had erupted that morning over it. "You treat that car like it's sacred, Dad. It's just a Ford," she'd said, smirking as she slung her backpack over her shoulder. I smiled, touched her arm. "It's not the car, love. It's the memories in it." I laughed quietly to myself, remembering that line as I turned onto the A947, heading home. The streetlights glimmered off the rain, casting shadows that stretched like fingers across the pavement. My mind wandered. Work deadlines, the stack of bills waiting on the kitchen counter, the creeping loneliness I felt since losing my wife. Then, just as I was rounding the bend near the old lighthouse, I noticed her car blocking the driveway. Classic Lydia. Always arriving late, always with a flurry of keys and excuses. I grabbed her keys from the hook, intending to move her hatchback so I could park mine. Sliding into the driver's seat, I flicked on the ignition. The heater kicked in, warming the car in minutes, the soft hum familiar and comforting. Then I saw her, or rather, someone, in the rearview mirror. She was sitting in the back seat, calm, unremarkable, but wrong. She had damp hair clinging to her face, a faded red coat, and she was looking down at her compact mirror, applying lipstick. I froze, gripping the wheel tighter. My pulse hammered like a drum. I blinked. She was gone. Empty seat. I rubbed my eyes, leaned forward, then leaned back. Nothing. I laughed shakily, trying to shake the cold dread crawling up my spine. "Jesus. You're losing it, mate," I muttered to myself. But the unease wouldn't leave. The world felt thinner somehow, as if the mist had peeled away the comforting edges of reality. I moved the car carefully, parked it, and stepped outside. Rain splashed against my boots. The world was silent, eerily so. No cars, no distant footsteps. Just the wet pavement, the smell of damp earth, and that nagging feeling that something was not right. For weeks I brushed it off, buried it under work, sleep, and routine. But Lydia started noticing things. She'd come home from school late, and I'd catch her glancing nervously at the rearview mirror. "Dad," she said once, "I swear, sometimes I feel like someone's back there, like, not in a bad way, just watching." I forced a laugh, trying to dismiss it. "Probably your reflection, sweetheart." But every time I drove my own car alone, I found myself checking the mirrors, half expecting to see her again. My heart would race. I considered telling her to stop letting her imagination run wild, but the truth was I wasn't sure I'd be able to sleep if I dismissed it. One rainy Thursday in early December, I woke to the sound of her car idling outside at 2:17 a.m. My gut twisted, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Lydia had never been out at that hour without a reason. I slipped into slippers and padded outside. There she was, hunched over the steering wheel, crying softly, hands gripping it like a lifeline. "Lydia," I said, rushing to the door. "What's wrong?" She looked up, tears streaking her cheeks, voice trembling. "Dad. She's back. The woman in the red coat. I saw her again, just like before." I froze. The blood drained from my face. You've seen her before?" She nodded. "Since Mom died, only when I'm driving home alone. I thought it was stress, or maybe I wanted to believe someone was watching over me." I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. Fog had gathered on the windows, and I wiped a patch clear with my sleeve. Faint fingerprints trailed across the glass. 5 long streaks, blurred but unmistakably real. My chest tightened, and I felt the weight of years of denial crushing me. After that night, I started paying attention. Every time Lydia left the house in her hatchback, I watched. I'd stand at the window pretending to read, but my eyes tracked her car as it disappeared down the wet streets. And she wasn't exaggerating. Sometimes there were shadows, fleeting figures in the rearview mirror just for a second before disappearing. I considered taking the car to a mechanic, checking the seats, the mirrors, even the wiring, anything that might explain what was happening. But everything was normal. The car was clean, functional, and utterly ordinary. No hidden compartments, no tricks. Lydia, meanwhile, started documenting it. She'd take photographs as she drove. Well, mostly pictures of the road and reflections, and occasionally, a blurred shape would appear in the background. Faint, almost unnoticeable, but there. We tried rational explanations, reflections of trees, tricks of light, fatigue, but none of them fit. The last straw came on a Friday evening. I drove her to a friend's house for a weekend visit. Rain misted the windshield, clouds low and gray. I glanced at the rearview mirror. Half a heartbeat, then a flash of red coat just for a second. My heart thumped cold and fast. The more we watched, the more I realized there was a pattern. The woman only appeared when Lydia was driving alone at night, usually on rainy or foggy nights. She never spoke, never moved toward the car, simply observed, always in the back seat. I began documenting too, keeping a journal of every appearance, every date, every weather condition. Weeks became months. Lydia's fear eased only slightly once we started acknowledging the phenomenon together. She developed a cautious fascination, photographing, recording, learning patterns. One late October night, I drove home from work alone. Rain misted the windshield. For an instant, my eyes caught the flash of red in the rearview mirror. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. And then she was gone, like smoke in the wind. But I knew. She wasn't a hallucination. Years passed. Lydia moved to Edinburgh for university. The hatchback stayed, and life went on. I sold the car eventually to a middle-aged teacher who called a week later. "I see her sometimes," the teacher said. "The woman in the mirror. Just for a second, always when I'm stopped at night." I smiled faintly, said nothing. Some truths are kinder left unsaid. Now when I drive alone, rain misting the windshield, I glance at the rearview mirror, half hoping, half dreading, to see her again. The experience hasn't broken me. It hasn't destroyed my life, but it's taught me caution, attention, and respect for the inexplicable. Some things can't be explained, only acknowledged, and sometimes, noticing is enough. Life is full of moments that don't make sense, small warnings that often go unnoticed. Fear isn't always irrational. It can be an instinct honed by experience. Sometimes the world shows you things you can't yet understand, and the wisest choice is to stay aware, observe carefully, and respect what you see. Ignoring the quiet warnings can leave you blind to dangers both ordinary and extraordinary. I never considered myself unlucky. Not really. I'd grown up in Asheville, North Carolina, raised in a neighborhood where everyone knew each other's business, and yet, somehow, I always felt a little off. Like I was walking a step behind the world around me. Maybe it was just my personality, cautious, quiet, and not one for unnecessary risk. But I liked routines, the predictability of life. That was why working as a night security manager at a hotel made sense. The job was dull enough to pay the bills, demanding enough to keep me awake, and repetitive enough that I could go home afterward, knowing exactly what to expect. My warm bed, my wife Anna, and the soft breathing of our 6-year-old daughter, Lily. The night of October 11th, 2021 started like any other. I had just finished my second night shift in a row, running mostly on caffeine and muscle memory. By the time I locked the hotel doors, my body felt like lead, and my head throbbed from fluorescent lights and too much paperwork. I slid into my silver Honda Accord, stretched my arms, and rubbed the bridge of my nose, trying to shake off the lingering fog of exhaustion. Rain lashed against the windshield, each drop a tiny hammer in a symphony of storm. I hadn't seen weather this bad in a long time. Wind bending trees to the asphalt, puddles forming deep enough to mask the lines of the road. "Drive safe. Roads are flooding near the river," Anna had texted. Her concern was comforting, but I waved it off mentally. I'd been driving these roads for years, knew them like the back of my hand. 40 minutes, that's all it would take. 40 minutes and I'd be home, warm coffee in hand, tucked into bed with Anna and Lily. At first, the drive was monotonous, the kind of darkness where nothing exists outside your headlights but shadows and the occasional flash of tree bark. My wipers scraped across the glass rhythmically, keeping up with the rain. Then, a shimmer of water pooled across the asphalt ahead. I slowed, grip tightening on the wheel. Stopping in a flash flood is never safe, but going through it can be worse. I eased the car into a three-point turn, sensors beeping urgently. That's when I saw it. A black SUV, headlights off, silently idling too close behind me. "Where did you come from?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the storm. The car had materialized from nowhere. A shadow separated itself from the darkness, tall, hooded, posture too still. My heart jumped into my throat. I rolled the window down a crack. "You need something?" I asked, voice shaking. No answer, not a sound. The figure raised a pale hand and knocked twice on my window. Soft, deliberate, like a metronome counting out my panic. I reached for the gear shift. Drive, go, escape. But then the rearview camera blinked and my stomach plummeted. Two more figures emerged from the SUV, hooded, silent, moving with a mechanical precision that made my skin crawl. My pulse hammered in my ears. I slammed the gas, tires spraying water, engine groaning as the car fishtailed across the flood. The SUV's lights flashed once behind me before disappearing into the storm. I didn't stop for 20 minutes. When I finally pulled into a gas station, soaked and trembling, I couldn't speak properly. Couldn't even explain it to the teenage attendant whose eyes were wide and unsure. "Call the police," I managed, voice rasping. 2 hours later, the sheriff and his deputy inspected the flooded section of the parkway. No footprints, no sign of the three figures. Just a half-submerged SUV reported stolen from Tennessee 2 weeks prior. Something about the night refused to make sense. The air felt heavy, thick with unanswered questions and the kind of unease that creeps under your skin and refuses to leave. That night I went home, drained and uneasy, but tried to sleep. Every time the wind rattled the window, every flash of headlights outside, my heart leapt. I convinced myself it was exhaustion, stress, the storm. But deep down, I knew better. Something had been out there, waiting. The next few nights I kept driving the same stretch, mentally rehearsing what I'd do if it happened again. I thought about quitting night shifts immediately, but I had bills, responsibilities. Anna noticed my tension, but I downplayed it. "It's just the weather, Danny. You're tired," she said, brushing a damp strand of hair from my forehead one morning. Her concern was genuine, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Driving home after work felt like stepping into a trap, every shadow a potential threat. A week later, the storm returned. Rain had eased to a drizzle, but the roads were slick, and the night was still. That familiar stretch of the Blue Ridge Parkway felt different, alive in a way I couldn't explain. Headlights glimmered across the wet asphalt. I caught a flash in the rearview mirror. 3 dark shapes at the edge of my vision. My stomach plummeted. I slowed, instinct screaming. My hands shook on the wheel as I edged past a particularly sharp bend. The SUV was there again, tailing me as if it had never left. I gritted my teeth and pressed the accelerator. The figures stepped out onto the road this time, moving in tandem with an unnatural coordination. One figure tapped on my rear window, another on the hood. The rain blurred everything, but I could see the outline of pale fingers tracing glass. "Back off," I yelled, voice cracking, heart racing. But the figures did not flinch. They didn't even speak. Just rhythmically, deliberately, silent, like shadows detached from reality. My mind scrambled. This can't be real, I muttered under my breath. But it was. It had to be. I slammed on the gas, tires spinning, engine screaming, fighting the slick road. They vanished again as abruptly as they appeared. My body was drenched in sweat before I even reached home. Anna was awake, holding Lily. "What happened?" she asked, alarmed, but I shook my head. "Just nothing. I'm fine," I said. Not lying exactly, just leaving out the terrifying details. The truth would sound insane. By the third night, I was barely eating, barely sleeping. My focus at work faltered. Every long hallway, every empty stairwell, felt like the perfect hiding place for them. I started keeping a baseball bat in the car, extra phone chargers, and pepper spray. Rationality wrestled with fear, and fear always won. I called the sheriff again. They were polite, patient, and skeptical. "We can send a patrol," the deputy said, "but without evidence, there's little we can do." Evidence. That was the problem. Every encounter left me drenched, exhausted, and panicked, but left no trace. Footprints vanished in the rain. The SUV disappeared without a sound. I began driving with a dash cam. Motion alerts, night vision, anything that might prove what I was seeing. Weeks passed. A flicker here, a shadow there. Each time I glimpsed them, my heart sank. I began losing sleep. Anna tried to stay calm, tried to keep me grounded, but I could see the worry etched in her face. One night the dash cam captured movement in the distance. 3 hooded figures stepping out, surrounding the car, then vanishing when I accelerated. When I played the footage for the sheriff, they frowned, but the quality was inconclusive. "It's something," they said, "but could be trick of the light." A trick of the light. Right. The stress began affecting everything. Work, home, even my relationship with Anna. I snapped at her once when she asked a simple question about breakfast. "I'm fine," I barked, immediately regretting it. She looked hurt, and Lily watched silently. Exhaustion and terror merged. I quit night shifts, moved my route for groceries, and even considered moving houses temporarily. But every attempt to regain normalcy failed. I started noticing patterns. Their appearances weren't random. Rain, fog, late hours, they followed me like specters tethered to my life. One night I parked near the gas station, intending to calm myself. It was just past midnight, rain lightly falling. And then, movement. 3 figures stepped out from the shadows. I froze. My body screamed to run. I fumbled for the bat I kept in the passenger seat, then locked my doors. The tallest figure raised a hand, slow, deliberate, palm facing me. The gesture was unnervingly calm. They didn't speak. They didn't rush. They just existed. Shadows in the night. Tangible yet unreal. The SUV was abandoned behind them, half in a ditch. I tried to reason, to scream, to beg, but my mind went blank. When the sheriff arrived, nothing was there. No footprints, no SUV, nothing. Months passed. The figures appeared sporadically, always in the rain, always at the edge of my vision. I learned to live with the fear, not because it was rational, but because survival demanded it. Sleep became fragmented, the parkway a place of dread. Eventually, I realized that fear was a teacher. It forced me to respect my environment, to avoid complacency, to pay attention. It wasn't about the figures themselves, it was about awareness, vigilance, and the fragility of safety. I learned to drive slower during storms, check my mirrors constantly, and trust instincts. Anna noticed a change. I was calmer, measured. The paranoia became a tool rather than a curse. The figures never harmed me, yet their presence reshaped my understanding of caution. Some nights, when rain hits the windshield just right, I still glimpse them at the edge of my headlights. And I smile faintly. Because I survived, because I learned to respect fear without letting it control me. Sometimes, fear is not a threat. It's a guide. It teaches us to stay alert, respect our limits, and survive challenges that appear impossible. Survival is not about denying fear, but using it to make better choices. I'd been freelancing as a photographer for almost 6 years, but the work never came consistently. Some months I was shooting weddings and family portraits, others I barely scraped together enough to cover rent. By late December 2024, I was desperate enough to take on side gigs I usually would have ignored. That's how I ended up agreeing to deliver a package for a local courier service at 8:30 p.m. on December 24th. In the middle of a blizzard somewhere in northern Maine. The courier's instructions were clear but peculiar. The address wasn't on any main road, just a set of coordinates that led deep into a dense pine forest. I'd glanced at the GPS and shivered, not from the cold, but from the sense of isolation. It wasn't the first time I'd driven through Maine's backwoods at night, but the snowstorm made every tree and shadow look like it was moving. My SUV's tires crunched over ice-laden gravel as I followed the winding path. The wind howled, rattling the doors and whistling through the cracked sunroof. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other on the package, a medium-sized box marked fragile. Something about the address felt off, like I was heading somewhere that didn't exist anymore. I shrugged off the thought, telling myself I was tired and paranoid. After 20 minutes, a dim light emerged through the snow. A small cabin nestled in a clearing, smoke curling lazily from the chimney. The single light flickered like a candle struggling against the wind. I parked cautiously, wiped the condensation off my windshield, and stepped out, boots crunching on the icy path. "Hello?" I called, my voice swallowed almost immediately by the storm. A faint echo of laughter and clinking glasses drifted through the air, but the sound didn't match anything visible. The cabin's door creaked open before I even had the chance to knock. A man appeared, tall, lanky, scarf wrapped haphazardly around his neck, and a smile that seemed too bright for the dim cabin light. "Ah, you must be the courier. Come in," he said warmly, but I caught a subtle insistence in his tone. "It's freezing out there. Drop the package right here." Are there other people inside?" I asked cautiously, glancing past him into the living room. "Of course. It's just a small gathering," he replied, smiling again. "Everyone's in the back. You'll see soon enough." I carried the box inside, the smell of pine and old wood filling my nose. But the room was silent, empty. Not even a single chair creaked. I frowned, placing the package on a small table. Is anyone actually—" "Don't worry about it. Just leave it here. Enjoy the warmth for a moment," the man interrupted, a faint edge of control under the pleasant tone. My instincts screamed danger, but I nodded politely, edging toward the door. Then I felt it, a cold draft brushing the back of my neck, and the faint laughter, overlapping like a badly tuned radio. It seemed to come from the walls themselves. I froze, heart hammering, every muscle tight. "Okay, I should probably get going," I stammered. The man's smile never wavered. "No rush. Stay a while. It's not safe outside in this weather." I didn't need a second warning. That was my cue. Slipping on ice, nearly dropping the package, I bolted for my SUV. The wind slammed into me like a wall, snow stinging my face. Fumbling with the keys, I started the engine, shivering uncontrollably. Through the rearview mirror, the cabin's light flickered strangely, as if watching me leave. Driving back toward the main road, I kept checking behind me, the package resting on the passenger seat like a silent witness to my fear. I called the courier office once I was on familiar roads, explaining I couldn't deliver to such a strange, isolated place. They were indifferent. "Address is correct," they said, as if that explained everything. Even weeks later, every creak of the floorboards in my apartment, every unfamiliar noise outside my car window, made my pulse spike. I stopped taking night deliveries, avoided isolated jobs, and began noticing things in the snow and shadows I hadn't before. That cabin, whatever it was, had left a mark I couldn't shake. I tried to rationalize what had happened that night. Maybe I'd imagined the overlapping laughter. Maybe the cabin was occupied by someone who enjoyed pranks. But it didn't feel like a prank. It felt deliberate. Someone, or something, had known I would come. For weeks, the image of the tall man's smile haunted me. Not the friendliness, but the insistence, the way he'd subtly restrained my movement like he was testing me. I began reviewing my camera rolls, hoping maybe I'd captured something out of the ordinary when I had been on other shoots. Nothing. Every snowstorm, every trip through northern Maine, my anxiety spiked. I kept my phone charged, parked with the engine running, and drove with the high beams on. I even started leaving notes for Anna. "I'll be late, don't wait up." She didn't understand the depth of my fear, and I didn't want to alarm her. But every memory of that night returned with a pulse of ice in my chest. I started noticing patterns in the forest. A tree that seemed to lean the wrong way. Snow tracks that didn't match anything I could identify. Faint whispers I couldn't place. I'd tell myself it was stress, too much coffee, the isolation of the region, but my gut never stopped screaming that it was real. That cabin wasn't just abandoned. It wasn't supposed to exist in the first place. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I had to know if the place even existed. I drove back toward the coordinates. Daylight this time, the snow crunching under my tires and bright sun glinting off the white landscape. When I arrived, the clearing was empty. No cabin, just trees, snow, and a faint depression in the ground, like something had been there decades ago. I went home and researched online. That cabin had burned down years ago, well before the courier address existed. Locals in nearby towns mentioned strange audio phenomena during winter storms, laughter, voices, music that seemed to come from the forest. I felt a chill creep up my spine. That night, I hadn't delivered a package. I'd walked into a memory of a place that didn't exist. After that, I avoided northern Maine for deliveries altogether. Every storm reminded me of the cabin. I noticed strange sounds at home. Footsteps, whispers, laughter from outside my windows that weren't there before. Anna asked if I was imagining things. I didn't answer. I knew better. Something had followed me, leaving a residue in my life. Even months later, when I took routine photos around the city or drove late at night, my pulse quickened if I saw a shadow in my peripheral vision. The forest, the snow, the tall man, they weren't gone. They had merely retreated, waiting. Time passed, but the memory stayed sharp. Eventually, I realized there was only one way to regain some control: acknowledgement. Fear was natural, even necessary. It told me what I didn't understand, kept me alert. I couldn't remove what happened that night, but I could use it to survive. Every snowstorm, I drove carefully, checked my mirrors, kept my doors locked. I prepared for the unknown without letting it paralyze me. And sometimes when the wind howled through the trees, I swore I could hear distant laughter, but it no longer made me run. It reminded me that vigilance was survival. Moral lesson: fear is not always an enemy. It can serve as a guide, teaching us caution, awareness, and respect for forces beyond our understanding. Sometimes the safest path is not denial, but acknowledgement and preparation. I never considered myself particularly paranoid, but that night, as I navigated the winding country roads of rural Montana, I couldn't shake the creeping unease settling in my chest. My name is Lucas Barrett, 34, and I work as a landscape architect, a job that keeps me busy during the day but leaves my evenings quiet, almost painfully still. My small cabin on the outskirts of town, tucked among fields and abandoned railroad tracks, was supposed to be a haven, a place to unwind after long client meetings and design sessions. Instead, that night it felt like a sanctuary I couldn't reach. It was August 18th, 2022, just after 10:15 8:15 p.m., when I left a meeting in town. The drive back was usually relaxing. The fog rolling in over the fields added a soft, almost poetic quality to the landscape. But tonight, the fog was thick, pressing in like a living thing, reducing visibility to only a few feet. My mind wandered to a car accident I'd had recently. Minor, thankfully, but enough to leave me shaken and worried about underinsurance. I tried to push it aside, keeping my hands steady on the wheel. But that's when I noticed the taillights. Far behind me at first, almost indistinct in the fog. At first I dismissed them, thinking it was another late traveler. But the lights followed me, accelerating and slowing whenever I did, mirroring every move like a reflection in a warped mirror. My pulse spiked. Okay, this is weird, I muttered aloud. I glanced at my phone. Dead battery. Typical oversight, I thought bitterly. My mind raced. Could this be a stalker? A random thief? The road narrowed further, single lane now, flanked on both sides by cornfields swaying in the breeze. Panic had barely set in, but it was creeping close. I tried taking a detour, a gravel side road I rarely used. Tires crunched against dirt and loose stones, masking engine sounds behind me. For a brief moment, relief. But then the headlights returned, impossibly close, reflecting like they were on top of me. My stomach dropped. "Stop following me," I yelled, voice cracking. Nothing. Only the faint echo of my own fear bouncing in the fog. I swerved around a curve, tires digging in. And then, nothing. Silence. I slowed, trying to catch my breath. Had I lost them? A shadow loomed suddenly in the road ahead. I slammed the brakes, sending my car into a shallow ditch. Smoke rose from the hood, a bitter reminder of my panic. Heart hammering, I unbuckled, stumbled into the fog and shouted, "Hello? Anyone there?" My voice echoed against the emptiness. The car was gone. No footprints, no second set of tire tracks, just fog, darkness, and a chill that settled deep in my bones. The kind of fear that doesn't leave, no matter how much you try to rationalize it. I finally made it back to the cabin, soaked and shaking, hands trembling as I locked every door and window. The interior, warm and familiar, should have offered comfort, but it felt oppressive that night, like the walls themselves were holding me hostage. Every creak in the floorboards made my heart leap. Every distant sound, the crunch of gravel outside, a flash of headlights through the trees, made me flinch. For days afterward, I tried to convince myself it was a prank. Maybe someone had been following me for sport, someone local who knew the roads. But the more I thought about it, the less sense that made. The car had appeared, disappeared, and reappeared impossibly. The shadow in the ditch. No person could have vanished that quickly. I began researching the area, reading old local newspapers and online forums. That road had a reputation. A driver had disappeared in 1987, leaving only tire marks and accounts of headlights that mimicked other vehicles. Stories of people vanishing in thick fog were scattered across decades. I had laughed at these tales before, dismissing them as superstition, but now they gnawed at my mind. Every night I relived the drive, the lights in the rearview mirror, the narrowing road, the shadow looming ahead. Sleep became fragmented. I kept a flashlight and a baseball bat near the bed. Anna, my sister, called one evening, asking if I was okay. I lied. "Just tired from work," I said, though my voice trembled. She had no idea. No one could understand what I'd seen, not without sounding insane. Weeks later, curiosity and stubbornness got the better of me. I had to know if the road itself was cursed or if my mind was playing tricks. Daylight, clear skies, and caution as my guides. I drove the same route again. Gravel, cornfields, and the familiar bends, all stretched before me. Everything seemed ordinary, almost peaceful. But the tire tracks in the mud told a different story. In certain stretches, there were depressions that didn't match my own, smooth and precise. Places where the soil seemed compressed unnaturally, as if someone, or something, had walked or driven without leaving a trace. I stopped several times, crouched, and examined the dirt. Nothing. No footprints, no tire marks to explain the shadows I had seen. I kept moving, trying to remain rational. My hand still trembled on the wheel. The fog rolled in again, thicker than before, and I realized the road was playing with me, stretching reality. A sense of being watched, of being chosen, gripped me. It wasn't random. That night I left the cabin for a short drive, determined to test my nerves. As the sun set, shadows lengthened, and the fog returned, clinging to the cornfields like a living curtain. Headlights appeared behind me once more, distant at first, then impossibly close. My pulse jumped into my throat. I accelerated, trying every twist and turn to shake the vehicle. Nothing. The lights stayed in lockstep, silent, mirroring my movements. Panic overtook reason. My hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles white. I screamed at the car to stop, to leave me alone. But silence returned. It was as if the road itself had claimed me. Finally, after a hairpin turn, the lights vanished. I was alone, but the shadow of that night never left. I realized the danger wasn't just the car, it was the unknown, the inexplicable, and the fragility of what we think is safe. Months passed, but I never forgot that drive. I avoided night travel on rural Montana roads whenever possible. My anxiety remained, simmering beneath the surface, but it taught me something vital. Fear is both a warning and a guide. Driving now, I check mirrors constantly, stay alert to shadows, and respect the roads, the fog, and the environment. I don't take familiarity for granted. That night taught me that sometimes what seems impossible, what defies logic, can still exist. The shadow and the fog had spared me, but only because I survived through vigilance, not bravery alone. Fear is a signal, not an enemy. It sharpens awareness, demands caution, and teaches respect for forces beyond our understanding. Survival isn't about denying fear. It's about listening, learning, and acting wisely. I've always believed that routine is the closest thing we have to safety. My name is Evelyn Carter, 32, forensic accountant, living alone in Salem, Massachusetts. After a messy breakup a year ago, I retreated into my habits, lock the doors, make tea, sink into crime documentaries, and avoid late-night encounters with strangers. I liked knowing what would happen and when. Predictability was my armor. That evening, March 3rd, 2025, the wind howled and rain streaked the windows of my townhouse. I had just returned from a long day at work, carrying my laptop bag and an umbrella that did little to shield me from the storm. The streets were empty, quiet except for the occasional drip from eaves and gutters. I relished these moments, the solitude allowing me to unwind, to process numbers and audits and spreadsheets in peace. I hung my coat and boots in the hall, shaking off the chill. That's when I heard the knock. Sharp, deliberate. My stomach twisted. Delivery? I called cautiously. A man in a gray uniform, soaked from the rain, cap low over his eyes, held a clipboard. Evening, ma'am. UPS. Need to verify your address and signature. Tonight? I didn't order anything, I said, frowning. Can I see your ID? The man hesitated. Of course, inside is easier, just for a minute. My gut screamed no. I tried reasoning, telling myself he was just a courier caught in a storm. I'll check through the door, I said firmly. He smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It's pouring outside. A quick signature won't hurt, I promise. Something about his tone made my pulse spike, too rehearsed, too familiar with hesitation. At that moment, my phone buzzed. It was Maya, my friend. Check the camera. Saw a man loitering near your street earlier. My hand shook. I wasn't imagining the danger. I'm calling the office to confirm, I said, reaching for my phone. He shifted closer, voice low, calm, but cold. No need to worry, he murmured. Step by step, he entered my threshold, though the door was barely cracked. Every instinct screamed, run. I grabbed the ceramic vase beside the hall table, heavy enough to incapacitate if needed. My mind raced. He knew my routine, probably every door, every cupboard, even my daily schedule. The man's eyes scanned the room with precision as if reading me. "Relax," he said, voice even but ominous. "You'll want to stay calm if anyone else comes." My chest tightened. That wasn't a threat. That was observation, calculation. Then the knock at the door, the real knock this time, shattered the tension. I swung the vase with all my strength. He fell, groaning. Maya and a neighbor rushed in, yelling, calling the police. He tried to escape through the attic hatch, but I had locked it. By the time officers arrived, he was in custody, shaking and muttering. Weeks later, detectives pieced together a horrifying truth. Brandon Morse, the man who had almost invaded my home, had meticulously tracked women living alone. They had charts, photographs, notes on routines, patterns, habits. I hadn't just been lucky. I had been predictable. My habits, the very thing I trusted, had made me vulnerable. In the aftermath, life didn't immediately return to normal. I triple-checked locks, changed routines, and started carrying a small baseball bat beside my door. Sleep was fragmented. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow outside my windows, set my pulse racing. Maya stayed with me often, checking in, keeping an eye on doors and cameras. I tried to rationalize my fear, telling myself that Morse was in custody, that the danger was contained. But the feeling of being watched persisted, gnawing at the edges of my mind. I reviewed my security footage obsessively. There were anomalies, movement in the periphery, shadows that didn't belong to any of us. I convinced myself it was fatigue, but the instinctive dread never left. Even when the news reported Morse's conviction, I felt exposed, a vulnerability that didn't vanish behind courthouse walls. I became hyper-aware of deliveries, neighbors, and passers-by. Every sound outside, every late-night knock became a potential threat. My sanctuary, the townhouse that had once felt like a shield, now felt fragile. My routines, once comforting, had become potential maps for someone else. Months later, I discovered a letter slipped under my door. "You were lucky. Not everyone gets away." The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the meaning was clear. Someone else had been watching. My heart sank. Morse had been contained, but his methods, the knowledge he had acquired about me, were now in someone else's hands, or at least someone who had taken notice of my survival. I realized my routines, precisely the thing I had trusted to feel safe, had left me exposed. I couldn't trust predictability anymore. Each step, each habit, became a calculated risk. I altered delivery drop locations, changed my route home, and installed extra cameras. Even with these measures, vigilance became my default state, my baseline of existence. With guidance from local police and self-defense classes, I learned to regain a sense of control. I carried pepper spray, reinforced doors and windows, and created emergency signals with neighbors and friends like Maya. My home became fortified, yes, but more importantly, I learned to trust my instincts over appearances. Every encounter with strangers, every unplanned delivery, every unfamiliar car was met with careful observation. I practiced scenarios mentally, rehearsed responses, and built contingency plans. The lesson was clear. Safety wasn't in denial or ignorance. It was in awareness, preparation, and readiness to act. By the time summer arrived, life felt partially restored. I could sip tea, watch documentaries, and even smile again when alone. But the experience left a permanent mark. Vigilance had become second nature, not paranoia. The incident had taught me to respect danger, to read signs, and to react decisively. Even now, months later, when a delivery arrives or a shadow passes in the rain, I pause, assess, and respond. Survival isn't luck. It's preparation, awareness, and the courage to act when instincts tell you something is wrong. Moral lesson. True safety doesn't come from ignoring fear or trusting routines blindly. It comes from awareness, vigilance, and preparation. Danger can appear in the familiar, and survival depends on listening to instinct and acting decisively. It was June 12, 2023, just after 11 p.m., and I was mentally fried. Weeks of non-stop coding, missed meals, and caffeine-fueled nights had left me irritable and numb. My friends had warned me about taking Cedar Ridge Road after dark, calling it dangerous, cursed even. I'd laughed it off every time. But that night, tired and impatient to get home, I decided to take the shortcut anyway. The sky was a heavy slate gray, rain streaking across the windshield in relentless sheets. My headlights barely cut through the darkness as I eased my aging sedan around curves that felt sharper in the wet. The rhythmic patter of rain was hypnotic, broken only by the occasional rumble of distant thunder. I told myself I was imagining things when the stories about the dead man's turn surfaced in my head. Old ghost tales from locals, always exaggerated, always meant to scare teenagers. But then, I saw him. A figure, drenched to the bone, standing on the side of the road with his thumb out. My heart kicked up a notch. Hesitation and instinct collided. I slowed, rolled down my window, and called out, "Hey, do you need a ride?" He looked up, face pale and drawn, eyes wide and frantic. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice barely audible over the rain. "There's something on this curve. People have died." I chuckled nervously. "Yeah, sure. Stories like that are usually exaggerated." He didn't smile. "No, I've seen it. Cars don't hit it. It hits the car. You can't see it until it's too late." His words made my stomach twist, but curiosity and disbelief outweighed caution. I motioned for him to climb in. Wet water ran off him, soaking my car upholstery. I adjusted the rearview mirror. His hands trembled as he stared silently out the window. I tried to talk, but the tension was electric. The rain intensified. The road became a slick gray ribbon disappearing into darkness. "Do you know what it does?" I asked finally, voice tight. "Some kind of force or presence. Cars don't hit it, it hits the car. You can't see it until it's too late." I laughed, but it was hollow. Something about him made me uneasy, like staring at a reflection in a cracked mirror. The last few hundred feet before the curve felt endless, a stretch of road where the air itself seemed to vibrate. And then I saw it, a dark figure in the middle of the lane, standing perfectly still despite the downpour. I swerved violently, tires skidding in the mud, and the car spun off the shoulder, sliding into a shallow ditch. The impact was minor, but adrenaline surged through me. I stumbled out, drenched and shaking. The hitchhiker who had warned me emerged silently from the car, then vanished. Just like that. Gone. I was alone, soaked, heart hammering, phone dead. Memories of childhood warnings, ghost stories about the curve, and decades of unsolved disappearances flooded back. Hours passed before a trucker found me and pulled me from the ditch. That night, the hitchhiker's image haunted me, the way he seemed almost glowing, like a beacon in the storm. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Even in the safety of my apartment, the storm and the curve played on repeat in my mind. The image of the hitchhiker lingered, almost tangible. It was like he had existed for a reason. Something about him wasn't threatening. He was warning me, guiding me. That thought refused to leave. By morning, curiosity turned into obsession. I dug into old newspapers, scrolling through digital archives. There were dozens of reports, spanning decades. Teenagers disappearing at that very curve. A family car gone missing. Accounts of survivors seeing a figure just before an accident, warning them to brake, swerve, or stop. A few had even called it a guardian angel of the road. I couldn't explain why, but I felt connected to those stories now, as if the curve had singled me out. I mapped every accident, every newspaper clipping, every eyewitness account. There was a pattern. The curve was unforgiving, but it didn't discriminate randomly. Some people vanished, some survived, and every survivor swore they saw something. I started talking to locals, trying to piece together the truth. A bartender at a nearby tavern told me he remembered a man standing in the rain when he was 15. He just appeared, the man said. Looked pale, soaking wet, warned me about the bend. I swerved. Car spun into the ditch, nothing broken. That man saved me. Another account from a retired police officer confirmed similar sightings. Some believed it was a spirit, some said a guardian angel, and a few swore it was just a very convincing trick of the mind. But the stories were consistent. The figure showed up only seconds before accidents, seemed tangible and real, and disappeared just as quickly. I couldn't stop thinking about the night I almost died. The hitchhiker hadn't tried to harm me. He had guided me, forced me to act. Without him, I might have ended up in the ditch, or worse. In the weeks that followed, my sleep schedule collapsed. Every small sound, every sudden movement in the dark, sent my heart racing. I drove past Cedar Ridge during daylight, trying to normalize the memory, but the curve still felt ominous. I couldn't explain it logically, but my gut refused to ignore the danger. I started keeping a small journal, documenting every feeling, every thought, every detail I could remember about that night. Writing helped me process what had happened. I realized something vital. Fear had saved me. The adrenaline, the instinct to take control, the memory of the stories my grandfather told, those were the tools that kept me alive. And the hitchhiker was the trigger, the catalyst. I also noticed the way stress and exhaustion had affected me that night. I was tired, mentally drained, and overconfident. I had underestimated the road, underestimated the storm, underestimated reality itself. The experience humbled me. It taught me that vigilance isn't paranoia, it's survival. I even returned to the curve once during daylight, accompanied by friends. The sharp drop-off, slick asphalt, and hidden ditch were dangerous even in clear weather. The realization hit me. What had saved me wasn't luck. It was action in the face of fear. The figure may have guided me, but I still had to drive, swerve, and survive. Months later, I found myself back on Cedar Ridge, this time volunteering at a local charity event nearby. The storm rolled in quickly, dark clouds swallowing the sunset. I remembered the warnings and felt a chill run down my spine. I wasn't supposed to be back here alone at night, but I had promised myself I would face the fear, rationally. As I approached the curve, I noticed a figure on the side of the road. Same pale, soaking presence. My heart pounded. This time I didn't panic. I slowed to a cautious crawl and saw the figure lift a finger, pointing toward the ditch before vanishing again. A chill ran down my spine, but I braked instinctively, hugging the curve perfectly, avoiding the danger. I realized then that Cedar Ridge wasn't evil. It wasn't malevolent. It was testing, observing, and occasionally saving. The figure, whether human or supernatural, existed to guide those willing to pay attention. And that night I drove away with gratitude rather than fear. The curve became a symbol to me, a reminder of fragility and survival. I no longer feared the dark, the storm, or the unknown. Not completely. I respected it. I understood that life gives warnings in unexpected forms, and ignoring them can be fatal. Ethan Cole's near miss taught me something fundamental. Sometimes fear isn't a warning to run. Sometimes it's a signal to act, to pay attention, to value life more consciously. And yes, Cedar Ridge remained deadly, mysterious, and elusive, but I survived, and that survival carried a lesson I would never forget. Life often sends warnings in subtle, unexpected ways. Fear is not always the enemy. Sometimes it is the guide, forcing us to act with caution, awareness, and responsibility. The world is unpredictable, and survival often depends on attentiveness, humility, and respecting forces beyond our understanding. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. It was October 5th, 2024, just after about 7:30 a.m. when I slid the last duffel into the back of my Jeep and took a deep breath of crisp autumn air. Was Derek Hayes, 36, a former Army medic trying to navigate life outside the military. The transition had been rough. Nightmares, sudden flashbacks, and that edge of constant vigilance I carried like a second skin. Clara, my wife, had insisted I spend a weekend in the woods. Get away from screens, from noise, she said. Let the forest calm you. I needed it more than I realized. The Ashwood forest seemed perfect. Even the morning sun didn't quite penetrate the dense canopy, leaving patches of golden light shimmering across the fallen leaves. I parked near a small clearing, the tires crunching against wet foliage. Setting up my tent was almost meditative, pitching poles, hammering stakes, and finally pouring a steaming cup of tea. The isolation was a balm. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel pulled in 1,000 directions at once, but I couldn't silence the war memories, the ones that snuck up when I let my guard down. Every snap of a twig sounded like gunfire. Every rustle in the leaves brought a flash of someone or something lurking. It was exhausting, this tension, but familiar. By midday, curiosity got the better of me. I followed a narrow trail deeper into the forest, boots sinking into soft mud. That's when I saw it. A shack. Small and weathered, tucked among towering oaks. Windows were covered in burlap, the wood scarred and peeling. A faint odor of smoke lingered in the air. Someone had been there recently. My heart thumped, adrenaline pricking my veins. I approached cautiously, scanning for movement, keeping my military training at the forefront. That's when I heard it, the crunch of a truck engine on gravel. Reflexively, I ducked behind a tree. Through the branches, I saw 2 men unloading heavy duffel bags from a black truck. Tactical vests, rifles slung casually across their shoulders. They moved with precision, like professionals. My stomach sank. I knew this wasn't hunters or campers. I stayed hidden for hours, watching them disappear into the shack. Questions churned in my head. Call the sheriff? Approach them? My knife didn't feel like enough. Every instinct screamed to run, yet part of me, curiosity, obsession, wanted to see more. Eventually, the men drove off. I exhaled slowly, heart still hammering. Cautiously, I approached the shack. Signs of recent habitation were everywhere. Muddy footprints, cigarette butts, fresh scratches on the door frame. Someone had been living here, operating in secrecy, and I had stumbled right into it. That evening, I called the Chuck sheriff, relaying every detail. His voice was calm but wary. Derek, this area's risky. Patrolling is minimal. You did the right thing by calling us, but avoid it. I promised I'd heed his advice, yet sleep that night was elusive. Every rustle of leaves outside my tent made me jump. Shadows in the firelight seemed to flicker with malevolent intent. I sipped my tea, trying to rationalize my nerves. But deep down, I knew the woods had changed something in me. I had glimpsed something dangerous and real. Over the next few days, I stayed at the clearing, hiking cautiously, testing my nerves. But I couldn't stop thinking about the shack. That night, I called Clara. I think I saw someone heavily armed, I whispered into the phone. Her worry was palpable. Don't do anything rash. Stay hidden, I admitted, reluctantly. I can't stop thinking about it. I need to see more. The following morning, I returned to the shack. Only now I noticed more subtle signs. A partially hidden trail leading to the back of the forest, flattened grass indicating repeated traffic. Whoever had been here wasn't just passing through, they had been here regularly. My stomach turned. I started mapping everything. The curve of the trail, the position of trees, every mark in the mud. Patterns emerged. Footprints indicated multiple people, heavy packs and frequent trips. Cigarette butts suggested long waits and hiding. I felt like an intruder, yet I couldn't look away. By nightfall, I found a fallen branch and used it as a makeshift walking stick. Every snap of a twig made me flinch. My military instincts screamed, scanning every shadow. Then came onto a truck in the distance. engine idling briefly before disappearing. My pulse skyrocketed. Someone, or multiple people, were still active here. Later, the sheriff called back. "Derek, we checked the area. Nothing concrete. Some debris, maybe illegal hunting, but nothing that confirms firearms or duffels." I didn't believe him. I could even feel the threat, lingering like a shadow. Weeks passed, but the image of the shack haunted me. I researched local reports, discovered mentions of missing persons, illegal firearms, and small-scale drug operations tied to remote areas like Ashwood. The forest had stories I wasn't meant to see. Every warning, every missing report, was a reminder. This was dangerous. I couldn't resist returning, armed this time with binoculars, a journal, and my survival knife. The path to the shack seemed eerily familiar. I noticed a small makeshift camouflage net, now abandoned, along the trail. Footprints were faint but visible. My hands shook as adrenaline surged, both from fear and excitement. For hours I observed, noting patterns and timing. Nothing appeared that day, but the forest had a life of its own. The wind through the leaves sounded like whispers. Every distant engine, every sudden rustle made me tense. This obsession was dangerous. I knew it, but I couldn't stop. Months later, curiosity drove me once more. Arriving at dawn, I noticed smoke in the distance. Heart hammering, I ran toward the clearing. The shack was destroyed, blackened wood smoldering, metal twisted and charred. Whoever had operated here was gone. Only questions remained. Authorities later confirmed that the site had been used for illegal arms and narcotics, connected to missing person reports. They wouldn't share more, citing ongoing investigations. I realized then that I had been far closer to danger than I'd imagined. The fear, the adrenaline, the constant watchfulness, it had all been justified. I had survived, but barely. Even today, every time I enter the forest, I feel it. Eyes on me, shadows shifting in the corner of my vision. The isolation I once craved now comes with awareness. There are dangers lurking even in serene landscapes. I reflect often on that weekend. The forest gave me calm, but also a lesson. Life doesn't warn you before danger appears, and curiosity can be lethal. But careful observation, patience, and vigilance, skills I learned in the army, can make the difference between survival and tragedy. I still hike Ashwood occasionally, but always alert. I've accepted that solitude is never complete. Danger exists, sometimes unseen, and respecting it is part of the balance. Curiosity and courage are valuable, but awareness and respect for danger are critical. Life often places us in situations where instincts, preparation, and caution determine survival. True wisdom lies in balancing curiosity with vigilance, understanding that not all threats are obvious, and not all solitude is safe. I'd lived in Tornado Alley my whole life, and by 13 I thought I knew how to handle the storms that swept across Oklahoma. We weren't talking about occasional rain showers. I mean the real, heart-thumping thunderstorms with sirens blaring, winds bending trees, and the sky splitting with jagged lightning. The kind of storm that rattled the windows so hard you felt it in your chest. That night, May 3rd, 2015, started like any other spring evening. My dad, David, had been working late in Tulsa, leaving me alone in our single-story ranch house with Bruno, our golden retriever who seemed to have inherited every bit of my nervous energy. I curled under the quilt in my dad's room, his presence a comfort even when he wasn't home, and watched the lightning dance across the cornfields. The wind rattled the windows, and the low hum of the refrigerator became a rhythm against the roar of the storm. "It's okay, Bruno. Nothing's gonna get us," I whispered, stroking his head. Bruno pressed close, his warmth grounding me, his low, steady breathing a reminder that I wasn't completely alone. But when the first big clap of thunder shook the house, I squeezed my eyes shut and hugged him tighter. I always hated the way the storms felt like they could reach into the house, like the walls weren't enough to keep the outside world out. Around 12:40 a.m., I thought I heard my dad's car pulling into the driveway. Relief surged through me. I bolted upright, pressing my face against the window. Headlights should have been glaring through the sheets of rain, but the driveway was empty. "What?" I whispered. I listened. Nothing. Then I heard a faint cough from the garage. My stomach tightened. "Dad?" I called softly, hoping for a familiar response. The garage door hadn't been opened. I could see it from my window. Bruno's hackles raised. He growled low, staring at the door as if he could see something I couldn't. Then came the voice. My dad's voice, unmistakable, calling my name from upstairs. "Megan." I froze. My chest tightened. My throat felt dry. "Dad? Where are you?" I whispered. The voice repeated itself, closer now. I could hear it in the hallway, but I knew, rationally, my dad was still away. Bruno growled again, more tense this time. Something was off. The voice didn't smell familiar to him. "This isn't Dad," I thought, panic creeping in. "Someone is here." I pressed myself against the bed, gripping Bruno tightly. Each clap of thunder made my body jump. I whispered reassurances to myself and him. "It's okay. Just stay calm. Don't move. Don't move." Minutes stretched, and the storm grew louder. I realized whoever, or whatever, was calling my name could get me to leave the bed. The tension was unbearable, pressing in from every side. The storm, the isolation, the unmistakable sound of an intruder. By 12:50 a.m., I had stayed frozen, unwilling to move, unwilling to make a sound. My mind raced. Every sound outside the storm, every squeak of a floorboard, every drip from the roof, every rattle in the windows, felt like a signal. Bruno's fur stood on end. I could feel the hairs on my arms rise with tension. Lightning illuminated the hallway briefly, casting elongated shadows. I crept toward the door, heart hammering, gripping my dad's flashlight. The beam shook in my hand. Another soft sound, scraping from the garage, sent a fresh wave of fear through me. Someone had touched the handle, dragging their feet across the concrete. My grip tightened on the flashlight. The voice called again. "Megan, come here." I froze. My stomach churned. Whoever it was had studied me, learning how to manipulate my fear, using the storm and isolation as tools. I realized I had to stay absolutely still. Bruno growled, low and protective, refusing to budge from my side. I edged closer to the bedroom door, listening. Each step was a test. The floorboards creaked under my weight. Each crack felt loud enough to betray my position. The storm outside roared, masking my movements. My mind screamed, "Get out, hide, run, don't answer it." Suddenly the doorknob rattled slightly. My stomach dropped. I pressed myself further into the wall, whispering to Bruno, "Stay, stay, don't move." Lightning flashed again. For a brief second, I saw the edge of a jacket moving near the hallway. Slow, deliberate. My heart jumped into my throat. I couldn't see his face. I couldn't see anything but the shadow that somehow seemed to fill the hallway. I backed into the closet, curling against the wall, holding the flashlight like it was a shield. I realized the storm, which usually comforted me, now amplified the fear. It made everything uncertain. The wind's howls, the lightning flashes, and the booming thunder worked together to mask the intruder's movements. By 1:05 a.m., I had decided that hiding wasn't enough. I had to know the intruder's intentions. I grabbed the flashlight, whispered to Bruno to stay close, and crept toward the stairs that led to the garage. Another flash of lightning revealed something unsettling. The garage handle had been slightly moved. My hands shook so badly I dropped the flashlight. It clattered across the floor. My heart pounded in my ears. I didn't hear anyone move, but I could feel the presence, deliberate, patient. Then came a thump on the ceiling above me. Not the storm. Someone upstairs. My mind screamed at me. My dad wasn't home. The dog was growling. I realized I was dealing with an intruder, or something else entirely. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. The storm drowned any sound I made. I retreated to the bedroom, curling on the bed with Bruno. My mind raced through scenarios, all terrifying, all implausible. I whispered a silent prayer, feeling both relief and terror. The storm pressed in like a living thing. By 1:20 a.m., I had given up on confronting whatever it was. I stayed in my dad's room with Bruno, listening, waiting, alert. The storm raged outside, shaking the windows, scraping the siding, making the house groan. Every flash of lightning seemed to illuminate the empty hallway, but the fear lingered. Sleep eventually overcame me, but it was fitful. I woke at 4 a.m., heart still racing. The house was quiet. The storm had passed. The first thought that crossed my mind was that maybe it had all been a dream. But then I saw my dad's car in the driveway. He had only just arrived moments ago. Relief flooded me, but so did confusion and terror. "Dad? You were here all along?" He frowned. "No, I just got home." "Why?" My stomach sank. Whoever had called my name had not been my father. After that night, my family installed cameras in every room. The garage and windows were reinforced. But storms continued to terrify me. Even mild thunderstorms brought back that sensation. The feeling of a presence that wasn't there. The faint echo of my father's voice and Bruno's protective growl. I never sleep in my dad's room alone anymore. The fear never completely left me. I learned something essential. Awareness and vigilance can protect you, but some experiences leave marks that don't fade. You learn to respect them, to prepare for the unknown, and to trust your instincts. Some intrusions leave no evidence, no tangible proof, only the lingering knowledge that you were not as safe as you thought. Fear, once planted, becomes part of your awareness, but it can also teach caution, vigilance, and courage. Moral lesson. Life often tests your awareness and instincts. While fear can be paralyzing, it also sharpens your senses. True safety comes not from eliminating fear, but from respecting it, preparing for the unknown, and trusting your judgment to protect yourself and those you love.